Today I'm going to talk about, I'm titling my message, I Got Doubts. And I want to talk to maybe just one or two of you, I don't know how many there are in here, that might have doubts. And if you don't have any doubts and you're like, I'm good, I completely trust God 100% of the time, I believe it all the time. I mean, you probably haven't been challenged enough in life. Maybe life's been a little too easy. That's fine. I'm happy for you. But if that's you, then just kind of take notes maybe, and you can share this with somebody in your life that might have some doubts sometimes. But I got doubts. And it's really hard to admit that, just in general, but really when you're on stage and Pastor Dustin and even ultimately Pastor Mac and Lynn trust me to be on stage here, there's a temptation to act like we have it all together. And I don't know how many of you have ever had an opportunity to preach, to be on a stage, or even just maybe it's presenting at a small group or a Bible study, right? Something at your school. But there's a temptation to act like I have all of the answers, like I have it all figured out. I don't have all the answers, but Jesus does. I know who does. It's Jesus. So I'll spoiler alert, I guess, for later in the message. But Jesus does have the answers. I don't. I still have doubts. Sometimes I question. Sometimes I wonder. Sometimes, even though I grew up in a great church, this church, in fact, but I grew up in a great church that taught the Bible, and I heard so many great messages. I was just talking to George before how I got to go down and hear from Jesse Duplantis, Kenneth Copeland, and Jerry Savelle when he was still alive. Every single year they came to my church. You know how many people would love that experience to learn from that wisdom? But even hearing them at the Upper Midwest Faith Explosion is what it's called, sometimes I still have doubts. Sometimes I don't have all of the faith that I think I should have. I remember learning about this guy named Thomas in the Bible. How many of you guys are familiar with Thomas? All right, you guys maybe heard the story as a kid. Watch this. Okay, I had like 3 people raise their hand. How many of you have heard of Doubting Thomas? Yeah, the rest of you guys raise your hand. So he's affectionately referred to as Doubting Thomas. I think it's a little unfair. I would hate for my name to, the prefix of my name to be like the worst thing I've ever done in my life, right? I'm not gonna go into, we've all made mistakes, we've all done dumb stuff, and then for that to be the one thing that everybody remembers you for. I feel kind of bad for Thomas, but let me read you John 20, verse 24 through 27. Let me read you that story about Doubting Thomas here. It says, now this is, if you don't know, this is after Jesus died, rose again, showed himself to most of the disciples that had seen him. But it says, now Thomas, called the twin, one of the 12, was not there with them when Jesus came, so he missed it. The other disciples therefore said to him, we have seen the Lord. So he said to them, unless I see his hands, the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Okay, so Thomas is like, I didn't see him, I don't believe it. After 8 days, the disciples were again inside, and Thomas is with them this time. Jesus came, the doors being shut, which is really cool. I feel like an unnecessary flex. He could open the door, but he's God, so why should he? I don't know. I would probably never use doors if I didn't have that. If I had that option to not use them, because I think it'd be more fun. He said, this is what he says to Thomas, peace to you, he says to everyone. Then to Thomas he said, reach your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand here and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing. So first of all, I want to be clear. We all know Thomas is Doubting Thomas. He gets a lot of flack, but it says here that the other disciples saw him and they believed. And Jesus did say, it's better for you to see or to believe without seeing, but you believe now because you see. It's better, but Jesus didn't like kick him out of the house and say, oh, you don't believe? Get out of here then, right? If I was Jesus, I'd be petty like that. I'd be like, you didn't believe me? You missed your chance. But what does Jesus do here? Jesus' response is very different than what I would have done, all right? Even though Thomas we consider him like the bad guy in this story. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but But I remember hearing the story as a kid, thinking about how bad Thomas was and how you don't ever want to be like Thomas and how we should shun Thomas. And I always feel bad. One of my friends' name was Thomas, and he always got annoyed that people would call doubting Thomas. And he's like, not all Thomases are bad. Look at Thomas Brady. He was a big Tom Brady fan because of his name. But as a kid, you're like, okay, you place everything in context, or you should at least as a kid, in like good versus bad, right? Like hot stove is bad, right? Don't touch it, okay? I like to use this example. This is just the way my brain works. If your brain doesn't follow me here, then wait for the next thing. It might make more sense for you. But you know, like in the original Star Wars trilogy, the bad guys had red and the good guys had blue and then green. Like that was it. Like that's very clear. As soon as they lit their lightsaber, bad guy, good guy. Very easy. And I heard an interview with George Lucas where he said he did that intentionally so that it was very clear and obvious to kids watching the movie, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy. I think you guys are old enough now to know that life just isn't that simple. It's just not that easy. Growing up, I would have probably pictured Thomas with a red lightsaber, okay? He was a bad guy, right? That's what I thought. But Jesus, yes, he, again, kindly, like I said, when God was talking to me, kindly tries to show him a better way and say, this is better if you would have believed without seeing. But you know what? I'm still here, and I still love you, and I still care about you. And you don't believe? Let me give you some evidence. Let me show you why you should believe. And in the old Star Wars, like I said, it was red lightsabers against blue and green, and now then Mace Windu came along, was like, I want a purple one, and then it just like completely opened the floodgates. And now there's like gray Jedi that have orange lightsabers, I think, or yellow or something. I don't know. Honestly, the whole thing gets very confusing after the original trilogy. Talk to Noah if you have questions about Star Wars. He knows a lot more than I do. But it's a little more complicated, right? There's gray Jedi have some side of the dark and some of the light, and it's complicated, it's confusing. But what I'm saying, life is more confusing and complicated than you were taught in Sunday school. And I say that with all love and respect for the people next door. I think they did a great job teaching you guys right from wrong. But now that you're a little bit older, you can start to hear like, okay, life isn't that simple. And I think that's where I got frustrated, is as someone who grew up in the church and hearing from great children's pastors and singing all the songs, well, this is good and this is bad. I'm not saying there isn't right and wrong, because there is. But as I got older and life just wasn't as simple as I thought it was gonna be, I had doubts and it shook me, right? One of the best people I ever knew passed away in his mid-20s, right? He's a worship leader. One of the friendliest, most loving people that I knew. And then you're like, well, wait, good people live and get good things. Bad people have bad things and die. Life's just not that simple. And so if you're not solid and know where you are, and I've talked about this probably to all of you, but especially with my interns, you have to know down here what you really believe, because life's gonna come and things are gonna shake. And if you're not secure here, it's gonna be really hard to overcome when those doubts come. So I wanna talk about Jesus' response to Thomas for a second. Thomas said, I want evidence. And Jesus said, okay, here's some evidence. He could have, and he did say it again, he said it's better if you would have believed without seeing. But he didn't, but he gave Thomas what he was looking for. Jesus met Thomas where he was at. God meets us where we are. So when you might have doubts, you might be discouraged at times when life doesn't look exactly how you thought it was going to. And look, I know that you guys are still middle school and high school, but life is real, right? Like, I hope I'm not trying to scare someone or mess with their theology, but I just want you to understand that life is real, and sometimes life doesn't give you what you're looking for. And you gotta be so secure in who God is in your life that you're not shaken by that. And God meets us where we at. Romans 5:8 says, God demonstrated his own love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I've said this so many different times on this stage, probably to you personally. I'll continue to say it. We don't serve a distant God. We serve a God who was up in heaven. He saw the mess that we were in, and he came down to do something about it. He didn't wait for us to try to figure out it on our own so that we could come up to him. He came down to us. He meets us where we are in our mess. But here's the key. But he doesn't leave us there. He doesn't leave us in the mess. He meets us in the mess so that he can bring us out of it. So if you're struggling with doubt, like I have, honestly, it's not something that I battled it and it went away and I never deal with it again. I still have doubts. I still question things. I still wonder sometimes. But I heard, if you read the story, I'm going to read Mark 9, 14 through 26 here in a second. If you're familiar with the story of Mark 9, there's a man who has a son who's demon-possessed. The disciples can't cast out the demon, so he brings him to Jesus. And I just want to remind you, we'll read it, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I want to say from that. Do we have it up here? I'll just pull it up in my Bible. But basically, I heard someone preach this message, and I honestly, I probably heard it so many times. You know, like I said, I grew up in the church. I went to Maranatha. I knew all of the Bible stories that I was supposed to know. I had the scriptures memorized. But when I heard this story more recently, and here's the thing. I mean, I'll be honest. I thought I knew a lot, and I probably had a lot of head knowledge about the Bible growing up. But it wasn't until I experienced some stuff that I really, and honestly, it's probably my own stubbornness. I thought I knew enough that I didn't need God to reveal anything more to me. And I feel like when I went through some stuff and I was like, God, I need you to make this make sense. And so he was able to speak to me. That's a whole other thing about pride. But so often we just think we know so much that God's like, okay, if you know it, go do it, go do your own thing. But when we surrender ourselves to God and admit to him that we don't have all the answers, that's when he can step in. Okay, but in this verse, I'm going to jump down to verse 23. Jesus said, if you can, so he brings his son to Jesus. Jesus says, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. We love that verse. That's one of the most quoted verses in Christianity. Print that on a t-shirt, right? All things are possible to him who believes. We love that. Here's what the Father's response was. He cried out and said, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Because I love the all things are possible to him who believe. But if I'm honest with you, sometimes I got doubts. Sometimes I don't believe. So then where does that leave me? If all things are possible for those that believe, then when I believe, when I'm in a good spot, awesome. But when I don't believe, when I'm struggling, where does that leave me? And to be honest with you, growing up in a Word of Faith church, which Living Word is, we heard so many great, powerful sermons on faith. And again, I probably wasn't listening as closely as I should have. I'm sure they said this to me and I just, again, thought I knew it all, so I didn't listen. But for me, I just put so much pressure on myself to make sure that I had enough faith, that I could, somehow muster up enough belief so that I could get the things that God had for me. And I never thought, as this man did, what if I bring my unbelief to Jesus? Because it's not wrong to have unbelief. It's not wrong to doubt. It's what do you do with those doubts? What do you do with that unbelief? What did this man say? He said, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. So he may not have had enough belief, whatever that might mean, for this demon to come out of his son, but he had enough to bring his son to, had enough belief to bring his son to Jesus, and he had enough belief to ask Jesus to help his unbelief. And once again, we see Jesus meet him in that place of unbelief. Just like he did for Thomas when he said, you don't believe? Okay, here, let me show you. It says, Jesus saw the people came running together. He rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more." And the spirit cried out, convulsing him greatly, and came out of him. So Jesus met him in that unbelief and healed his son anyway. And honestly, this can kind of mess with some people's theology a little bit. And I don't mean to discount anything you've heard about faith, because I believe that absolutely. And I'm going to go into this a little bit more, but I just, again, this is for the people that might be struggling. And if none of you are, then great. I'm glad that you're in a good spot, but maybe somebody watching online is, or maybe I'm just going to watch this back for myself later online because I need it. But the first thing I just want to say is that God will meet you in that unbelief. And I want to encourage you a little bit that belief and unbelief can exist in the same person. And again, that might mess with your theology a little bit, because it's like either I believe or I doubt. And this guy says, I believe, but help my unbelief. Jesus constantly tells people a lot, which he kind of says it, I don't know, I like to picture him saying it a little kind of petty, like, "Oh, ye of little faith." But to me, that says that you can have a little faith. You can have a lot, and a lot's better than a little, but a little isn't nothing. So if all you have is a little faith right now, let's start with that. Let's bring that little faith to Jesus and see what he can do with it, like he did for Thomas, like he did for this man whose son was demon-possessed. I have a very obvious object lesson for you guys. Can I have one of you guys hand me a chair? I know you guys have seen an it didn't have to be your chair. I mean, that's fine. Just one, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that, Naomi, thank you, but there's some empty chairs. I didn't want you to have to stand. I appreciate you giving me the chair. But I'm sure you've all heard somebody say, if you trust in God, right, you'll depend on him so he can come through for you. Like the chair. You all walked in the room. None of you had probably any second doubts about coming in and sitting down on one of these chairs when it was time. I'll be honest with you, maybe you should have. These chairs are getting a little janky. Although, I don't know if it helps or hurts, but when I find a broken chair, I throw it away. So I've thrown away a decent amount of broken chairs. So I don't know if that helps, because now you're like, okay, he got rid of them all, or if that hurts, because I seem to find broken chairs fairly often. But we do get rid of them. So hopefully your chair is not broken. But if I'm going to get the rest that I want, I have to trust that this chair will support me, right? When you're a child, maybe it takes you a while to kind of figure out what I can sit on, what I can't, what I can. But now, at the age you guys are at now, you guys have probably had no hesitation to come sit in this chair. No problem, right? Right? No problem with this. I trust this chair enough to hold me up when I sit down. But what gets complicated for me is now, I didn't think this through because I'm kind of afraid of heights. But now, like, standing on the chair, to me, that's a different level. Like, I just proved, if I had doubts, I just proved to myself that this chair can hold me, right? It can support the weight of me as a full-grown man, right? That has not quite met his New Year's resolutions yet. It can hold me. I know that. But when I stand on this chair, I still got some doubt. I'm still not quite sure. Now, part of it is probably because I'm afraid of heights. And I know it doesn't look that tall. And I know this stage is like, this is probably the height of what the old stage was. But yeah, that's my fear of heights is something I'm working on. But also part of it is probably I don't trust my own balance enough, which maybe was where my fear of heights comes from, because I just don't trust my own balance. But this chair can hold me. So theoretically, I should be able to stand up on this chair, no problem. And again, like, this is kind of embarrassing. I should have thought this through before I made this an object lesson, that I can actually stand on this chair. Honestly, this I thought this would go better than this. Okay, whoa, hold on. Okay, so the chair did work. The chair held me, okay? Now I'm gonna get down because, man, that's bad that I got to work on that's scary. Okay, but you see how I had plenty of faith to sit on the chair, but I didn't have maybe enough as I thought when it came to standing on the chair. Now, I ended up having enough belief because I did stand on there. But do you see how there can maybe be different levels and how belief and unbelief can kind of coexist? And so what would happen to me is growing up, I'd hear a great faith message, and then I would be fired up and get excited, and then I would leave, and then I would like maybe try to apply that faith lesson to my life, and maybe wouldn't get the results I wanted right away, or maybe the excitement would start to fade after a while, and so I would start to doubt. And I'm like, it's a great message. I know that theoretically, I know that this chair can hold me, but I still don't fully trust it enough to stand on there. And like I said, a lot of it has to do with my own, I don't trust myself to my balance to get up there. And I think if I was honest with you guys, I can read the Bible and I can hear great stories about God moving and doing all of these amazing things. And I don't doubt that. But sometimes I doubt if he can do it for me. And I think, well, I'm getting too honest here, but I know my own flaws. I know the problems that I have, and I'm like, okay, I know God is powerful, but will he do that for me in my life? And so if I'm honest, that's where more of the doubt comes from. It's not in the chair necessarily in and of itself. It's in my ability to stand on that chair. Right? But here's the thing. So again, even if you have belief, even if I'm talking to somebody who's doubting right now, and maybe you're even listening to this and you're like, I still don't know. That's okay. Understand that God is bigger than your unbelief. And if that's the only thing that you take away from this, I mean, please don't check out now because I got more to say. It won't be much longer. But if the only thing you learn is that God is bigger than your unbelief, and you can throw away any guilt or shame that you might have from the doubts, I'm okay with that. Maybe take that for now, and then if you do miss the rest of this, go back and watch it, or write it down so you can come back to your notes here. But if you can just start with understanding God is so much bigger than your unbelief, and doubt doesn't disqualify you, right? Jesus said to Thomas, it's better that you believe without seeing. But his doubt, his disbelief did not disqualify him, right? Even though with that disbelief, and I'm not downplaying faith, faith is extremely important. But if it's just about my faith, then it's all on me. And I have to believe so much. And how is that much different than works? How is that enough? I'm doing so much good that God can bless me. I'm believing so much that God can bless me. Right? It's not all up to us. And honestly, I just don't think we even have that much control. I think I'm not downplaying faith. Please hear me in this. But understand that even if you're in a place of doubt, God can still meet you in that place. And don't throw everything away because you doubt one time. I know, and I've shared this to all of you guys before, and maybe I should come up with some better stories, although this had a huge impact on my life. But when Sav died, I know people who let those questions of how did this happen? Why did this happen? I know people who let that doubt creep in and completely destroy everything they've ever learned and have completely walked away from the faith because they couldn't get over that doubt. But doubt does not disqualify you. I want to go Matthew 8, 23 through 27. This is a pretty familiar story, one of my favorites. Now, when he got in the boat, capital H, Jesus got in the boat, his disciples followed him. And suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea so that the boat was covered with waves, but he was asleep. I love it, taking a nap in the middle of the storm. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we are perishing. And he said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Again, he used that, I think, in kind of like a little bit of I think Jesus had fun with little faith. Then he arose, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was great calm. So the men marveled, saying, who can this be, that even the winds and the sea obey him? What I want you to learn from this is that the disciples did not have enough faith to calm the storm themselves. They were terrified. Jesus said, you have little faith. Why are you so scared? But even in their doubt, even in their unbelief, they knew enough to go to Jesus. They knew enough to wake him up. And so what I want to ask you is even if you're doubting, even if you have unbelief, will you take that to Jesus? Have you learned enough? Do you know enough? Like the man with his son, he brought him Jesus. He wasn't sure if he had enough belief, but he brought that to Jesus. So I'm going to share just a few things, and then I'll close just about what we do if we have doubt. Okay? We know that if we bring those doubts to God, God's not afraid of your doubts. If you bring them to him, he will meet you where you're at. And then as the example of that man with his son, he didn't have the belief, but Jesus made up for it. Jesus will meet us where we're at and bring us to where we need to be. God will never require something from you that he won't supply. Okay? If we're talking about money, 2 Corinthians 9:10 says God gives seed to the sower. Talking about love, 1 John 4:7, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. God never told us to love anyone in our own strength. He said, receive love from him and then show that love to other people. God never asked you to give that what you don't have. He said, I will give seed to the sower. I'll give you what you need. It's crazy, right? It'd be like going to Target, put some groceries on there. They give you a total and then they say, okay, your total's $100. Here's a Benjamin. And they just pay for it. And then it's like, well, what are we even doing here? But that's how God works. He requires something from us, but when we bring that need to him, he actually meets that need. He will never require something from you that he won't help supply. Okay, so what do we do? Just real quick, first bring it to Jesus. Bring your doubts to Jesus. If you have doubts, if you have unbelief, if you're unsure, if you have questions, where you go with those questions is huge. I've talked about this before. Bring them to Jesus. Point 2, second thing we can do, be intentional with building your faith. Romans 10:17 says, then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Right? Come to church. You guys are all here. You're doing that. Good job. Continue to go to church. Listen to podcasts, other sermons, read books. I was actually just talking to George beforehand. He's in the middle of reading, almost done with this book that I actually just bought on Amazon before I came up here, by Jesse Duplantis. Dr. Jesse Duplantis. That's important. He's a doctor, so he knows what he's talking about. I Never Learned to Doubt is the name of this book by Jesse Duplantis. It was like $15 on Amazon. Read that book. If you're like, man, this book is about overcoming doubt. And if you know anything about Jesse Duplantis, he's built his ministry on faith and belief, and it's huge and it's important and it's great. Read books, go to church, listen to podcasts, listen to sermons. Be intentional with building up your faith and feeding your faith good things. Because again, it's okay to doubt, but it's not okay to stay there, right? God wants you to bring that to him so he can help you grow. I like to use this example. Faith is like conditioning, right? How many athletes we got in the room? I was never much of an athlete, but you guys like conditioning when coach just makes you run and run for no reason, right? Well, it is for a reason, supposedly. It's so that you can be in shape so that in the fourth quarter or the third period, I got a hockey jersey on. It felt hockey-ish outside with all the snow, and this is the only one I own. It's a Mighty Ducks jersey because that movie's awesome. In fact, greatest trilogy ever made. No disrespect to Star Wars, Mighty Ducks. I'm just saying. But you practice, you condition in the off season so that when you get to the games, you're in shape enough to still hit your free throws in the fourth quarter, right? If you try to wait until the game to run a whole bunch to build up some endurance, it's too late. You're just gonna tire yourself out. But if you do the conditioning that coach asks you to do in early season or the off season, then in the fourth quarter, when you need that endurance, it's there. And there's nothing you have to muster up. You're just not as tired as the other team. And that's why your coach makes you run. Sometimes because you're late or talking back. Also, they might make you run. But like that, faith needs to be built up, and it's so much better to build it up when you don't need it. So if you're in a place right now and you're like, hey, I'm good. I'm not doubting. I don't have doubts. I don't have unbelief. I trust God completely. I'm happy for you, like I said. But something might happen in life where you might need it. So take that time right now to build up your faith, just like you would build up that endurance, so that when the time comes, you don't have to try to muster up something else, but it's already there. The next thing to do is just surround yourself with faith-filled people. Who is in your life? And I'm not saying you can't be friends with unbelievers and friends or your family members. Don't completely cut out people that aren't Christians. But you remember the story of Jesus healing Jairus' daughter in Mark 7. It says in verse 37, he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. We see it again in the garden when he's praying before he goes to the cross. He brings those three just a little bit closer. If you guys go to Maranatha and you were in middle school, you heard me talk about Naaman in chapel yesterday. And he went away discouraged, but he had someone in his life that said, you know what? Maybe you should give this thing a try. Where you go with your doubts is everything. Right? Like I said, the people that I know that completely walked away from their faith after Sav died are people who maybe went to other people with doubts, and they fueled each other's doubts. But if you go to people who have a walk with the Lord, they can encourage you when you have doubts. They can point you in the right directions. They can probably recommend some books or some sermons or some things you can listen to. You need people in your life that are building up your faith, because even Jesus had those people with him when he went to go raise this girl from the dead. Even when Jesus was like, I'm about to do a miracle, and oh, by the way, I'm God. He said that, not me, don't get it twisted. Jesus said, I'm God, I'm gonna heal this lady, but I need all of these unbelievers out of here. I need all of these people that are doubting out of here. I need people that are with me, that are truly with me in faith, people that also believe what we're about to do here. So are the people around you feeding your faith or your doubts? The last thing I'm gonna say is just, if you got doubts and you're not sure if you can trust God, I'm just gonna say do it anyways. Now this part may not apply as much if you're younger and you're in school and you just gotta do what your parents say, that's fine. But maybe there's some seniors that are about to graduate, or maybe even juniors thinking about what's next, or maybe, there's options in front of you. Maybe it's looking for a job or a relationship. Trust God in that, and even if you don't, do it anyway. The story of Matthew 14, Peter does not get enough credit that he walked on water. Okay, everybody knows Jesus walked in water. That's great. He's God, really cool. But Peter also got out of the boat. And Peter I don't know if he was 100% sure that this water was gonna hold him, but he was like, you know what? If Jesus calls me to come, I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna step out and I'm gonna do what he's called me to do, even if it doesn't make sense in my brain. Peter was a fisherman. He'd been out on the water thousands, if maybe millions of times in his life. He knew the water. He knew very well that you could not walk on water unless it's, where's Luke, a water bottle you could walk on. I don't know, frozen water. I guess in Minnesota we walk on lakes. But Peter knew this water could not physically hold him. He was walking on the word of God, not the water. Jesus said, come, and he got out of the boat. The only disciple that got out of the boat. And here's the thing. Again, what I remember from this story is that he took his eyes off Jesus and he fell. And I remember being taught, again, maybe I just wasn't listening. There's probably more to the story, but I just remember, focus on Jesus or you'll fall. And that's probably true, right? I recommend you focus on Jesus and keep your eyes on him. But what I missed was the next part. When he fell and he said, Lord, save me. And Jesus reached out and grabbed him anyways. Even Jesus, again, if I was Jesus, I'd have been petty. I'd be like, no, you doubted. You stopped focusing on Jesus. You fell. Too bad. If you step out on faith, even if you're not 100% sure what God's called you to do, maybe it's what college you go to or career you go into, even if you're not sure, even if it doesn't work out, maybe you were wrong, or maybe you just started to doubt, or you got your eyes off Jesus, Jesus will save you. Now you have to call on him, right? You can't just continue to live your life your own way and just expect Jesus to bail you out of every situation. But no matter what situation you find yourself in, if you turn and call on God, he will save you. Romans 10:13 says, whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. You got to call on him. You have to turn to him. You have to look to him. You have to bring your doubts, your questions, your concerns. You have to bring them to him. But when you do, he's not going to turn you away. He's going to meet you where you are, and he's going to bring you up. So real quick, just to finish, if you are struggling with unbelief, bring it to Jesus. Be intentional with building your faith and surround yourself with faith-filled people. God is bigger than your unbelief, but you have to bring it to him. He will always meet us where we are, but he loves us too much to leave us there. Let me pray. Lord, I thank you that you met us here in this place and that you continue to meet us where we are. Lord, I say a prayer for anyone that might be doubting, for anyone that might be discouraged, questioning, not sure, Lord. We know that life can be tough and that we don't always have the answers. I don't know it all, but I know you do. And I can rest in that trust, in that peace that you have me, that whenever I call out, you will save me. Lord, be with us the rest of the night. As we leave this place, Lord, we know that you never leave us. We take your presence with us everywhere we go in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, if you guys are in junior high and you haven't signed up for the lock-in yet, you can still do that. That'll be this Friday. Lots of fun. We're gonna have inflatables and games and also lots of fun stuff. Also, if you are graduating high school or have graduated high school, we are officially accepting applications for the internship for next year. So if you have questions about that, you can talk to me or we got a couple of interns in the room, Kelsey, Chelsea, and other rhyming names. You can talk to them. All right, thank you guys. See you on Sunday.